Hello crafty friends and welcome to my channel Create with Callia. I'm Callia. Today I'm going to be scrapbooking these pictures. I have 6 4x6s and 10 3x4 pictures that I'm going to use to create my layout. This layout is also part of an inspiration collaboration design team mystery envelope challenge. I created this month's challenge and it's a Love Your Stash challenge. I included some DSP from the Perennial Lavender collection and die cuts from Perennial Postage and Pretty Florals, plus embellishments from the Shades of Green hexagons. The challenge was to pair these non-holiday themed items with products from the September through December 2025 mini catalog, September online exclusives, or November online exclusives to create a scrapbooking layout themed to any of the Halloween through New Year's Day holidays. We had to use a little bit of every item included, a cut from the DSP, one of the sprigs, one of the embellishments, and so on. One of the goals is to show alternate ways to use items that you may not think of using for holiday themed layouts. One of the first things I did was to bring in the color coach and to look at the colors that are complementary to Lost Lagoon, Pretty Peacock, and Shaded Spruce, since those are the primary colors in the pattern paper from Perennial Lavender. Poppy Parade, Real Red, and Cherry Cobbler are across the color wheel and complementary to the primary colors in the Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper. So I know that those will be perfect colors to incorporate into my layout to bring it into a holiday themed layout. The first thing I do is to bring in 2 pieces of white willow cardstock. Next, I bring in 3 of the sheets of the Traditions of Christmas pattern paper. These papers include the colors Real Red and Cherry Cobbler, so I think they'll be a great way to bring Christmas into this layout. As I look at the first piece of pattern paper, the Granny Apple Green doesn't work for me with the other greens that are in the Perennial Lavender. Next, I look at this poinsettia paper with the gold accents, and I absolutely love this paper, but it's way too busy to pair with the pattern paper from Perennial Lavender. So I'll save that for another project. Last, I try this dot pattern paired with the Perennial Lavender, and I like that. I also add a strip of Real Red cardstock as a transition strip between the 2 different pattern papers, and that helps me to better see what my layout will look like in the end. With the papers laid out like this, I realize that I don't quite like the look of the layout yet. As I move the dot pattern down, I realize that I do want a little bit of white willow cardstock at the top of the layout. I also bring in a piece of cherry cobbler cardstock because I don't think that I want the pattern paper from Perennial Lavender right to the edge. When I bring that in, I realize that I also don't want it right to the edge of the cherry cobbler. And so I bring that down and create a little space with the white willow cardstock. I like the way that this is looking, and I think that that's how I'm going to design my layout. I'm going to leave a 1/8 inch strip of cardstock around 3 sides on both pages of my layout. Right now I'm working on gutting the cherry cobbler cardstock. I'm going to do this on both sides of my layout. Taking the center out of the cardstock helps to save on the amount of weight and also allows me to save the cardstock for future use. I typically measure in 1 inch from each side to remove the center of the cardstock. That means I'm cutting out a 10-inch square from the center of my cardstock. This allows me plenty of room to place the adhesive to put down my white willow cardstock. Next, I cut off a 1/2 inch from the Perennial Lavender pattern paper and bring my picture back in so that I can get an idea of how wide I want to make the piece of Perennial Lavender paper. I'm going to trim the pattern paper so that the right-hand edge falls at about 4 inches into my layout. I ended up with Perennial Lavender pieces that were 11.5 by 3 3/4 and 11.5 by 2 1/4. I added a strip of Real Red cardstock that was trimmed to 11.5 by 3/8 of an inch to each side. I then trimmed down the dot paper to 11.5 inches by 8 inches for the left-hand page and 11.5 by 9 3/4 inches for the right-hand page. The dot pattern does have some directionality to it, so if you are going to replicate this layout, just make sure that you pay attention to the direction that you want the dots to run. I chose to make sure that the dots looked like they were in a vertical line on my page, because that also matches with the vertical lines created by the Perennial Lavender paper. Next, I've brought back in the embellishments that were included in the mystery challenge. I also am bringing in the sticker sheet from the Traditions of Christmas suite of products. I considered using this large title sticker that says the most wonderful time of the year, but I decided it's not working for me as a title. I think I'm going to use this piece of cherry cobbler cardstock as my title area, and so I start looking at where I want to place that. You can see that I've also stamped some gumdrops from the Gingerbread Man stamp set in real red on one of the postage die cuts included with the mystery envelope. Next, I try out the sticker that says Merry and Bright, but that also does not work for me. I start looking at the sticker that says Making Magic to see if that might be something that can work for one of my embellishment clusters. I do like it at the top of the page here, but then I remember that I do have two pieces of pattern paper that I also need to make sure that I'm including on the page. So before I start working on the other embellishment clusters, I want to make sure that I get my title area complete first. When I'm working on embellishment clusters, I want to make sure that I incorporate similar elements into every one of the clusters. And I feel like in this case, making sure that I have my title area together first will help guide how I put together the rest of the embellishment clusters. I bring in several different stamp sets to see what might work for helping to create my title. I first bring in the Joyful Tidings stamp set, but I don't like the way that that's looking. So next I bring in the Keeping Traditions stamp set. I didn't want to stamp Merry Christmas, but I did want to have something that indicated that this was a Christmas themed event. I decided to use the big Christmas title stamp and then stamp Cheer from the same Keeping Traditions set underneath it. I've used the branching out dies to create the bracket that I'm stamping the title on. I then stamped the holly leaves from Keeping Traditions in Pretty Peacock on my title piece. I'm using real red to stamp the holly berries, and I also used real red to stamp my Christmas cheer title. Next, I want to find a way to incorporate the two pieces of pattern paper that were included in the mystery envelope. I've used a tag die set from my stash to cut out two different tag tops to incorporate the DSP. At this point, I realize that I'm not 100% committed to having the gumdrops where they are. However, when I try to peel them up off of the title that I've created, they start to tear the White Willow cardstock. So at that point, I decide that I am going to leave them where they are. The pictures that I'm using are from a community event that we attended in November of 2018. The event included a story time with Santa where he then did a meet and greet with the children afterwards. There was also a cookie decorating station, and businesses came in and decorated Christmas trees so you could walk around and look at the different Christmas trees. I decided to include pictures of our favorite trees from this event in this layout. Since this event was a travel from station to station type event, the pictures feel a little disjointed, which is why I'm going to make sure that I include journaling that describes the event on the piece of white cardstock that's in the middle of the right-hand page. My title area is starting to come together, so next I'm going to work on creating the embellishment clusters to create my visual triangle. I've cut two circles using the Spotlight on Nature dies and then used Joyful Tidings to stamp May the Wonder and Magic of Christmas Fill You with Delight. I cut the top part of the circle off, thinking I would like that as the start of my embellishment cluster under the pictures of my boys decorating cookies. And as soon as I cut it, I realized I don't like it. So I instead moved that up into my title cluster, and I'm liking the way that that looks. I moved the pieces that I cut off around the page to a couple different areas to see if I'll be able to incorporate them and realize that they're not really going to work for me anywhere, at least right now. The process of embellishing my pages is often what takes me the longest to complete when I'm putting together a scrapbook layout. I feel like the title area is pretty well complete at this point, and so I'm going to move on to starting to embellish the other areas. I've once again gone into my stash and pulled out this tab die to help incorporate the pattern paper into my other embellishment clusters. I like the way these tabs look, and then I'm also going to bring in the Making Magic sticker that I had been looking at before. As a reminder, this layout is part of an Inspiration Collaboration Design Team monthly mystery challenge. So make sure you stay tuned to the end where you'll be able to find the playlist to watch the videos from the other creators. As I'm creating my embellishment clusters, I'm also trying to keep in mind that I will be using flip-flaps on this layout, so I don't want things to overlap my photos too much, otherwise they will end up being covered up once I put the flip-flaps on the protector pages in my album. I'm going to play with the placement of these sprigs to see if I can find a place that I like them, and that helps me bring another element from the mystery challenge into my embellishment cluster. I will include a full list of all of the products I've used to create this layout in the description box below, so please make sure to check that out when you're done watching the video. I also would sure appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I appreciate everyone who comments and would love to know if these are the types of events that you like to attend during the holiday season. I'm finally happy with how these sprigs look, and so I'm ready to move on to creating embellishment cluster number 3. I've used the same tag set from my stash to cut out 2 more tag tops to incorporate the pattern paper into this third embellishment cluster. Because there's directionality to the brown paper, I also am making sure that I'm paying attention to the direction in which I'm cutting the tags out for that paper. I bring the Merry and Bright sticker back in, and I really am liking that with this embellishment cluster. I'm going to start working on placing the sprigs so that I've incorporated some of them as well, since I incorporated them into my other 2 embellishment clusters as well. I do want to make sure to mention that as of the publication date of this video, some of the Traditions of Christmas suite may be sold out and unavailable. However, it is expected to return to my website around November 10th. So make sure that you're checking back if you're wanting to purchase items from this suite. I continue to play around with some of the die cuts that were included in the mystery envelope to see if I want to add anything more to my layout. I tend to be a little bit less is more when it comes to building my embellishment clusters, but I do like to play around and make sure that I include everything that I want to make the embellishment clusters look complete. You'll notice that I just used the Spotlight on Nature dies behind the Merry and Bright, and I did take it out. However, after watching the video while I was working on editing, I realized that I really liked the Spotlight on Nature partial die cut behind the Merry and Bright. So if you check out my photos on Instagram, you will see that I did end up adding those back in on the right-hand side of my page, along with some additional real red cardstock to my embellishment cluster on the lower right-hand side of my left page. That helped me bring real red into all 3 embellishment clusters as well, which helps make them feel cohesive and help your eye to travel across the page. I'm now using the shades of green hexagons to add some additional bling to all 3 of my embellishment clusters, along with faceted snowflakes in red. When I use tags, I like to make sure that they look complete. So I either will use a fiber to create a tie at the top, or I like to sometimes use gems to fill the space created by the tag. I'm making sure that I incorporate some of the gems into each of the embellishment clusters, as that will also help them to feel cohesive. And with that, I think that this layout is done. I'm really happy with how the title area of this layout turned out, especially with all of the embellishments and the faceted gems. I also like how the faceted gems and the shades of green hexagons work well together to create that extra little bit of bling that I want for all 3 of my embellishment clusters, which also feels perfect for the season. Make sure to check out the playlist here for the layouts created by the other designers. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day and craft on.